The third largest city in the US is a land of deep pizza and wind, but more importantly it has a rich sporting heritage, a fact that is reflected by their many fine sports venues. So let's check out the stadiums and arenas of Chicago, Illinois. Chicagoland if we're being technical. Where better to start than at Wrigley Field, which is not only the second oldest Major League ballpark, but also one of the most famous sports venues in the country. Older ballparks tend to have plenty of interesting characteristics, and Wrigley Field doesn't let you down in that regard. It's got the famous marquee out front, the ivy-laden outfield walls, which add a touch of elegance, and the Wrigley rooftops just outside the stadium itself. Whilst it might be charming and pretty, there are of course some downsides to its age, that being the cramped concourses and some less than ideal sightlines that you get from some seats, amongst other things. The Cubs did actually consider building a new ballpark elsewhere. I'm glad they stayed here though. If they ever did decide to demolish it, I feel like you'd get a few dozen fans participating in a Homer Simpson style hunger strike. You know, I never respected Homer up until that point, but I do now. Credit Union 1 Arena. This is a strange one, not the design or anything, that's pretty straightforward, but its history is a little odd, because it was built for the UIC Flames basketball and hockey teams, but the basketball team doesn't often attract more than a couple thousand spectators, and the hockey team no longer exist. The other permanent tenant at the moment is a roller derby team, so unsurprisingly the upper tier of seating gets less use than a Scottish man's sunglasses. It's safe to assume that this venue is only able to keep the lights on by hosting concerts and whatnot. Soldier Field. From what I hear, this place is somewhat divisive amongst the locals, and there are several reasons for that. Unlike their NBA counterparts who play in the largest venue in their league, Soldier Field is actually the smallest stadium in the NFL. Another factor that splits opinion is that this relatively modern stadium was built on the site of the pre-existing Soldier Field, which wasn't completely demolished, far from it. Due to the fact that the old Soldier Field was a multi-purpose venue, the perimeter was large enough to just plonk a brand new stadium in the middle of it, without needing to demolish the pre-existing facade. So it really looks as though it fell from the sky onto the old stadium. Due to the room constraints, the seating is very steeply stacked, particularly on the eastern side. I kinda like that, and I also love the blend of old and new architecture, but a lot of people don't. And much like Wrigley Field, there are some problems that you can't see in these external shots. It also gets extremely cold here right by Lake Michigan. Julie Health and Care Field is home to the Joliet Slammers, who are presumably one of the only sports teams that's named after prisons. The reason for that name is the nearby Joliet Correctional Center, which is actually kind of famous. It's even been featured in a few movies. The venue is also home to a minor soccer team called Steel City FC. You're thinking, hang on, I thought Chicago was the Windy City, not the Steel City. Well, Joliet specifically was once home to the second largest steel mill in the country, a fact that is also reflected in the design of the ballpark. There's a whole lot of exposed steel everywhere. It's looking good. Less so when it comes to the field, but an artificial field does save a lot of money, so it's understandable for a small-time venue like this. Wintrust Arena has a visually striking exterior featuring a mostly glazed facade, but the most notable aspect is probably its roof, which not only has the flag of Chicago painted on it, but it bulges upwards significantly. I think part of the reason it does that is so that it can accommodate such a large video board. Maybe, I don't know, it is a pretty large one. It's got to be one of the largest at a college arena. Maybe, I don't know, it is a pretty large one. Those in the upper tiers wouldn't be able to see the court if it wasn't for that bulge. Speaking of the court, I always love those that depict a city skyline, as is the case here. I believe it's the Chicago skyline. But I do like how the light flowing through that big glazed facade flows all the way into the seating bowl itself. SeatGeek Stadium. Of course, SeatGeek is the name of a ticket platform, but do you reckon there is actually someone out there who is literally a seat geek and just obsesses over seats? Oh man, the Lumbertech 580 is so ergonomic.
And durable.
Yeah, I've heard it's durable, but look at those curves though. You could call them chairmen. From above, this does look just like other MLS stadiums built in the 2000s, but there is one major difference. That being the brick and stone facade that would look more at home on a college campus. What it does share with other MLS stadiums of the era is the stage at one end, for concerts. I wonder if it's hosted the band called Chicago. They're from Chicago, don't you know? Speaking of which, when Chicago Fire schedule games at Soldier Field instead of here, the stadium management are probably like, "Ooh, no, baby, please don't go." Gentile Arena. I don't know why they felt the need to specify that this place is not Jewish. Sign of the times, I guess. Shame. On second thought, it's named after Joseph Gentile, or Gentile, who was a car dealer that donated money to the school, so disregard that earlier comment. Anyway, this is the third college arena we've seen so far, but it's the first that actually looks like a typical college arena. That's because it's situated on campus and is just blending into the surrounding buildings. As for the interior, well, usually maroon and gold isn't the best color combination, but I kinda like it in this instance. Is that what a rambler is, or is that just a wolf? I think it's just a wolf. Maybe a rambler is a type of wolf. Anyway, I'm rambling. AllState Arena. In most cities, an arena of this size would be the largest in the city, but that's not the case in Chicago. Upon opening, this place was home to the DePaul Blue Demons, but they of course moved to Wintrust Arena when it opened. The arena floor is named after Ray Meyer, who was a longtime coach of DePaul's basketball team. However, the only team that calls this place home now is the Chicago Wolves, a minor league hockey team. The floor was named when the Blue Demons still played here, so I don't know if that name extends to the rink itself. One interesting design feature here is the timber roof, which looks great, but it's more than just an aesthetic feature. It was designed to lessen the noise from the planes flying overhead, as it's situated right near O'Hare International Airport, which planes tend to frequent. Well, the nerd planes do anyway. Everyone knows the cool planes hang out at Midway. Now we have an arena called Now Arena. Man, this city has so many arenas. I guess it's to escape the wind of the Windy City? Speaking of which, this place is home to the Windy City Bulls, who are the Chicago Bulls G League affiliate. Despite having only played here since 2016, that is still the longest tenure of any of the 10 or so teams that call this place home. It's not that the other teams were disappointed with the arena and moved elsewhere, it's just that most of them ceased to exist. Speaking of ceasing to exist, the construction of this arena was a joint venture between several corporations, one of which was Sears Holdings. That may seem random, but they were headquartered nearby. Their successor, Transform Co., still is. The arena was originally known as Sears Center. That's changed now. That's changed to now. Ryan Field is the largest college football stadium in the Chicagoland area. Or was the largest college football stadium in the Chicagoland area. The quirky old stadium will make way for a new Ryan Field, which will have a capacity of just 35,000, significantly less than the old stadium, but it'll have better amenities, including a significant amount of roof coverage, wider concourses, an ice rink out front, increased purpleness in the form of bucket seating. The list goes on and on. It's set to be completed by 2026. WelshRyan Arena. Welsh Dillon would have been a more authentic name, would it not? Ryan is an Irish name, isn't it? Oh, hang on, there's a hyphen. Never mind. Welsh is the surname of someone related to the Ryans in some way. And the Ryans donated a lot of money to the school, which funded a major renovation of the arena in 2017-18, although it had already been called WelshRyan Arena since the 80s, when their first donations were made, and it was subsequently renovated. Like the country of Wales though, it is rather small. Currently, this arena has the smallest capacity in the Big Ten Conference. The Big Ten is known for big arenas, usually of 10,000 seats or more. Their renovation decreased the capacity by about 1,000, but there's no doubt it improved the arena overall. It's looking good. Guaranteed Rate Field. I have been poking fun at some of the names in this video, but this place in particular is known for having one of the worst names in Major League Baseball. However, I suppose it's a fitting name considering that, unlike Wrigley Field, this ballpark is pretty much devoid of charming quirks. It's basically perfectly symmetrical, and there's no ivy in sight. It's not all that surprising given the age difference, but then again this is only 1 year older than Oriole Park at Camden Yards, which has plenty of charm. To add insult to injury, rather than a panoramic skyline backdrop or indeed a warehouse, what little view there would have been is blocked by billboards. But a ballpark is made to host baseball and it does an adequate job at that. The highlight of this place might be the facade, which was designed to pay homage to Comiskey Park, the former home of the White Sox. That is a nice touch, I'll give it that. Just when you thought there couldn't be any more arenas in the one city, along comes United Center, the largest of all arenas in the land of Chicagoland, and indeed the largest arena in the NBA, as I mentioned earlier. Not the NHL though, the Quebecicans have that one. The interior is, as you can see, much more interesting than the exterior would suggest. That center-hung video board puts Wintrust arenas to shame. It's huge. The United Center opened in 1994, which was basically the height of the Chicago Bulls' popularity and success. They had this guy called Michael Jordan, who was, from what I understand, quite good at putting the ball in the hoop. Less so for the Blackhawks, although they have won 3 Stanley Cups since then, which is the same as the Bulls. To be clear, the Bulls haven't won any Stanley Cups. I was talking about, yeah, you know what I mean. Speaking of Blackhawks, when that name is said in an American accent, it sounds almost indistinguishable from, well, never mind. I shouldn't forget about motorsports, as I have done in the past. Chicagoland Speedway. Architecturally speaking, this place is fairly straightforward, as speedways tend to be. There's certainly no elaborate facades or anything like that. It's not in a built-up area, so they don't have to worry about curb appeal anyway. The entire capacity is coming from one huge single-tiered grandstand that elegantly curves its way around the back stretch. It mostly consists of bench seating, which is par for the course. Of course, it's a race course, not a golf course, or indeed a course for a horse. Next door is Route 66 Raceway, which I almost did overlook, but it has a 30,000 seat grandstand, which is a little surprising, especially considering that the last one had just over 50% more than that. It consists of a drag strip and a dirt track. Part of the reason why the track next door was built was the success of this place. As of 2019, they're both owned by NASCAR, so they're not really competing with each other. Not that they would anyway. Different tracks for different meets. Impact Field. Oh yes, I remember Impact Field from the American Association of Independent Professional Baseball video. It certainly made a big impact on that video, hence the name Impact Field. This was actually the potential site of a potential new home for the Chicago Cubs back in the day. It's not that far away from AllState Arena, so that means noisy aeroplanes up above. The most unusual aspect to this ballpark would have to be the video board over here. Why, you ask? It looks pretty straightforward. Well, it backs onto a major road, and to capitalize on this, the other side is actually a video billboard. Sometimes it advertises the Chicago Dogs, sometimes it advertises a maze, whatever that is. Chicago Dogs is certainly not an intimidating name, considering that it's referring to these kind of dogs, but it is very much a fitting name, because if you look around at the spectators here, you'll notice that
they're eating the dogs.
And those were the stadiums of Chicagoland. My favourite a lot would have to be Now Arena. I am of course joking, I'd say Wrigley Field. Yes, it's antiquated, but antique stores exist for a reason. Thanks for watching, have a good one.